So I will begin and then Devarshiji will also share some things. So books and music. Books have always fascinated me because I have had you can say an extreme curiosity and the desire to know the truth and gain knowledge. So when I came across Ananda through the grace of masters and Swamiji, books was one of the mediums which I liked, and I saw that he had written so many books, so I was happy with that. And I went about reading them, and there's a lot to learn from it. Half an hour definitely doesn't do justice to all the books and the music Swamiji wrote. But even if we tune into the way he wrote the books, and the way why he wrote the books, we can learn a lot, and using those learnings we can grow spiritually too. If you are interested on the list of the books and the music which Swamiji wrote, if you Google Swami Kriyananda CV, you can find a PDF. And if you download that PDF, there's a list there of all the books he wrote and all the songs he composed. And it is a good reading experience to know all of it which was done. And at some point in this incarnation, if you can read each of these things or listen to each of these things at least once, it will be good. Not necessary, but good. And for books, Swamiji himself wrote another book called Story Behind the Story, where he describes the story behind each of the books he wrote. So even that is a good book to read. I can show you this one. And it is also good. And for songs, there is a Tale of Songs. I don't think it is in India, but you can refer to it. Coming back to why he wrote the books which he wrote. Swamiji in the new part describes that when he was searching for the truth, at first he saw himself trying to find truth through writing. So he was studying becoming an author and a playwright. But then he came to the realization that he couldn't transfer his ignorance to the world. So he gave up on that, and then he came across the autobiography of a yogi, met Master, and dedicated his life to finding God. He was thinking he would meditate and reach God quickly, but Master said, your work in this life will be writing, editing, and lecturing. All three of them is actually a very unique expression of sharing, each different from the other, as Swamiji said. So Swamiji initially tried to resist that, but eventually he started doing it. And we all can happily say that he did that, because otherwise how would we have known so many applications of Master's teachings in all walks of life? It was truly, as Master said, spiritualizing every aspect of life where we are, because not everyone can become a monk, stay in a cave and meditate all the time. Even the monks who are staying in Ananda, they are not living in caves. So not everyone can do it. So that is why every aspect of life Swamiji took Master's teachings, how to practically apply them, and all walks of life, as I said, business, education, leadership, yoga, scriptures, philosophy, science, artistic expression, all of these things Swamiji expressed. So I would like to read from a preface of the book Heart as a Hidden Message. The preface was written by Derek Bell. He was describing Swamiji and his book. So here one artist describing Swamiji, and Derek Bell was a great artist. He was part of the band The Chieftains, which won the Grammy Awards about 5 times. So here is what Derek Bell writes about Swamiji, which explains to us in certain ways what Swamiji did when he expressed creativity. What strikes me above all about Donald, which was the name of Swamiji, is the all-embracing nature of his mind, which is probably the result of his incredible capacity for concentration. He has an ability to uncover countless unusual aspects of a subject and to reveal them in an unexpected and original light. When he turns the spotlight of his concentration on any given subject, he leaves no aspect of it uncovered. So from this very message, we can gain some insight on how Swamiji wrote books or composed music. Intense concentration. And when Paramahansa Yogananda ji was asked, how do you attract inspiration at will? He said you need intense concentration, and he demonstrated it by going to his point between the eyebrows and dictated a poem right away, which is a part of his book of poems, Whispers from Eternity. So Swamiji would use the same method where he would tune in with intense concentration to a stream of consciousness, the message of which he would want to express, and receive it. He wouldn't sit around trying to figure out, thinking that what should I express, what should I use. He would go around expressing it as if he was receiving it from a higher source, as a flow. And if you look in history, all the great artists, all the great expressions of genius, creativity which came through different people, most of them will attest to the same fact, that they didn't come up with it by thinking about it. They received it as inspiration, because that is the definition of genius, that it is not something which is developed, it is something which is received, which is what Swami Kriyananda ji did when he was expressing these teachings in the books. One interesting thing which while preparing for this session I was doing was, I referred to one of his books, Religion in the New Age, which is a book on essays. So there he explains a thing about clarity. So Swamiji was writing an essay. It was called God's Weaning Ways, in bracket a non-essay. So he was started in a very beautiful way, clear way, explaining a certain spiritual concept. He goes on and on and on. At a certain point, he writes abort, and he stops the essay right there. And then he says, I have stopped the essay because I want to show you what clarity really means in writing and other things. So he aborted there. And if you didn't know he was going to abort, and if you read at it, it's a very beautiful piece without even being aborted. You wouldn't know whether there was anything unclear in that if you read it on its own. But Swamiji stopped it, said abort. Then he goes on to explain that it is a non-essay, but he said when you express creativity and clarity, you have to tune in to the level of reality of the people you are going to share this with, and it has to match their realities and so on and so forth. So it is a homework for you all. If you can read that non-essay, God's Weaning Ways, it is very enlightening on how Swamiji wrote books and how much effort went into it. Not intellectual effort, but effort of pure conscious attunement to higher spiritual truths, and that comes only by intense concentration, receptivity, and energy. So our teachings in a way enable us to do those things, but we have to have the energy not only to write things but also to receive and read things. So another thing from which you can do from the Religion in the New Age is Swamiji's section on editing, where he compares, where he went through how his process of editing was, and how much he made the effort so that these things would be clear to people who would read it. Because he said there is a difference between writing and lecturing, whereas in writing sometimes it feels people are far away from you, so he made it an effort that it would be closer to you. So when you read his writings, it would be as if you are having a conversation with the author, which has been my own experience with reading Swamiji's writings, that when I read his New Path, it's as if he's talking to me right now. And very few people can write in that way, but we are fortunate to have that experience of Swamiji's writing. Master said to Swamiji when Swamiji first met him, Swami Kriyananda when first met Yogananda ji, Yogananda ji said, how do you like my autobiography of a yogi? Swamiji said, it's wonderful. He said that, Master said, that's because I put my vibrations in it. When you read Swami Kriyananda ji's books, you will see that the words have his vibrations in it. And his vibrations are not his because he was in tune with Yogananda ji. So we have Yogananda ji's vibrations through those books. Words as a way of communication are actually very indirect if you see. Because even if you say the word orange, you won't know what it means unless you have eaten an orange. So words are indirect in that way. So they just point at a different things that this means that, this means that. But Swamiji, by imbibing the words and the right use of words in the right flow, imbibing them with the consciousness of God, he has in a way brought about the best way you can use words for communication and sharing these teachings. So I would recommend you to read as much as possible, but just not read. Understand, imbibe, digest, and learn from it and experience it in your own life. Because just plain reading for the sake of it is not useful. It's useful in its own right, but you can go further and experience it and apply it in your own life. Because Sri Yukteswar ji used to say, idle reading is not useful. One has to go deep into it. And he also said, which we see in Swamiji's writings, that saints would say a truth in one lines which scholars will go about debating on and on for years and years, which is the way Swamiji wrote his writings. He said he kept it very seminal, that if you take one line from Swamiji's writings, that in itself would be a teaching on which you can go further, deeper and deeper. So that would be what I would share about the books of Swamiji, and I would recommend, if you can, go deeper in some of his books, one of which Swamiji was very encouraged us to read and understand was his edited version of Master's Bhagavad Gita commentaries. Master said that millions will find God through that book, and Swamiji, when he saw the version which was released by Self-Realization Fellowship, God Talks with Arjuna, he said that didn't express Master's spirit and clarity of the Bhagavad Gita. So he did the editing, and he remembered when he was with Master, when he was editing the Gita commentaries, and he remembered it from about 40 years back or more, and he was able to replicate it idea for idea. So do read it. It has the power to change your life. Music. Swamiji said that if you want to know me, listen to my music. Which in itself is true, because music as a form of communication is much more effective than words. Why? Sound is a vibration, energy is a vibration. We are all made up of energy. So when we hear any sound, it has a much more direct impact on our energy and helps us change our consciousness. So be careful what you listen to, because sound has a great power over you, especially in today's age when there is sound everywhere. You go into some shop, they are playing music. You go outside, there is some noise coming around. So it is very important what you listen to, because it has the power to change your consciousness and the thoughts you have. Good music, uplifting, peaceful music will give you good, uplifting, peaceful consciousness. Restless, agitating music will give you the same thing. And I'm speaking from experience, because before I came to Ananda Music, my taste in music was not so uplifting. And I bore the fruit of that and learned through experience. So, and Swamiji again used the same concepts of creativity, which Devarshiji would also share some things about that to us, and used that to express the sacred teachings of self-realization through the music. One of the reasons Swamiji composed so many, about 400 pieces of music, was he said music is such a beautiful medium of expression, but there is no good music or lyrics available for any of these teachings. Like, even if someone has inclination to take wisdom and knowledge through music, it is not available. So he said, let me do it. And when the thought came, and the music came to him. One example of Swamiji's beautiful music is, it's not complicated, it's very simple, but when you listen to it, it has the power to change your consciousness. So one example was, once Swamiji was thinking about how in the astral world angels would have choirs, and they would sing the about the beautiful message of God. So when Swamiji was thinking about it, he immediately received, heard a choir of angels singing, which he eventually named as Life Mantra. The first two lines of that music is, God is life, God is joy, life is God's, life is joy. If you just hear it now, it's so simple, but when you listen to that choir, it is tremendously powerful. So here is a procedure I would like to recommend or suggest. You can try it. Take any piece of Swamiji's music, listen to it, try to understand what it means, not only with the mind but heart and soul. Try to understand what it means. Once you understand that, apply it in your own life and repeat the whole process. Go deeper in it every time you do that. And try this with any piece of Swamiji's music. You will see it has really a power while listening, while applying, while learning. The way this music was composed, it was beneficial not only for the people who heard it but also for the people who sung it or who played it. So it is fascinating, and I'm always enthusiastic about the books and the music of Swamiji. With that, I would like to invite Devarshiji to share with us some more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramesh. It was very delightful to hear that. And maybe I'll start with more on Swamiji's music, because his music, his writing, all of his creative expression were an expression of consciousness and an expression of higher consciousness. All music is an expression of consciousness. Swamiji said about music, he says, music, more than most human creative endeavors, has the potential to resonate with the higher realities of love and joy. And I would even go further and say that music, more than any of the human creative arts, not just most, but more than any of the arts themselves, yes, it has the power to resonate with higher realities of love and joy. Now, the downside of music is that it also has the power to resonate with lower realities. And we've all seen this. I grew up listening to a lot of music in my younger days, and just, it was not very helpful in the end. I thought I was enjoying it, but it didn't uplift my consciousness, and it didn't really improve me in any way, and it didn't attune me to higher realities. But Swamiji's music and other, truly inspired music has that power. And in a way, it's not his music. He just opened himself up, offered his consciousness up, and it took great concentration, but it was an uplifted concentration where if he needed a particular melody or song, he would pray, he would offer himself up to the light, and he would, almost like tuning in to a radio station, he was tuning in and receiving the music that was there in the universe. And if our radio receiver is tuned in to higher realities and higher vibration, these higher realities of divine love and divine joy, that's the music that we will receive. If our receiver, which is in the heart center, at the center of feeling, is attuned more to the realities of emotional love and emotional type of joy that's just brief and like a bright flame burning quickly and then dying, then we'll attract that kind of music or art. And so it begins with uplifting our consciousness. There's a beautiful story that Swamiji would tell about a great composer. His name was George Handel, and he wrote this piece called The Messiah. And this piece is a big orchestral, but mostly choir piece about the birth and the life of Christ. And all these years later, centuries later, everyone in the West sings this song, choirs sing it, and it's performed because it's so uplifting, really transcendently uplifting. And the story behind that is that when Handel was writing this piece, he didn't create it. He said, similar to something Swamiji said about this piece of the life mantra, where Swamiji heard these angels singing it, Handel was in an ecstatic, uplifted state. And because he was a composer, when he was in this ecstatic state, he tuned into creativity through divine music. That's where his receiving station was tuned. And so he was in a state of ecstasy. I mean, it was like divine bliss. And he didn't eat for days, and he shut his door, and he wrote this entire piece, this entire symphony, or many, many songs with all these complex different parts. And later he said that he didn't create it. He said he heard the entire thing. He heard the angels singing it, and he said all he did was write it down. Now, you can't say that all he did was write it down, because he consciously was in this state and consciously tuned into it and received it. Now, this is what Swamiji did, and that's why his music has a real power to transform our consciousness, because it was drawn in that same way, and in very particular ways too, not just joy or love, but certain qualities like strength or divine power, or just compassion and softness. And his music conveys all these different divine qualities. And so they're really amazingly effective for changing our consciousness. I find that if I'm in a mood, or if I just need to change my consciousness, I'll go for a walk and put my earbuds in and listen to a few of his pieces of music. They really are extremely powerful. And even just the simplest pieces of music, where it's just him and the guitar and his voice, because voice also conveys vibration. Vibration is the power of the universe. Before there was this creation, there was pure spirit beyond creation. And out of that pure spirit, Om, vibration began. Even in the West, in the old Judaic Bible, the way they put it was that, before there was anything, there was this pure spirit, and then God moved, and God, in the beginning, was the word of God. And that was the very beginning, was the word, which is the Om, the vibration. And this vibration resonated out from the universe. And it is the creation. It didn't just create all this. It is creation itself. It's creativity itself. And so this is why music especially goes more to the heart of creation, of creativity, of vibration, of feeling. And that's why it's very important to be very careful, as Ramesh was saying, as I've experienced when I was younger, to really be more conscious about the music we listen to. And even the chanting that Swamiji, his chants that he wrote, the chants that Yoganandaji wrote, there was really to try to establish a different way of devotional chanting that was non-traditional and not coming from old ways that probably got a little bit, I wouldn't say degraded, because there's a lot of beautiful chants, but it's not from the highest level. And they consciously were trying to bring devotional chanting up to a much higher level, not just an emotional one of the heart, but also an exalted devotional one. And the difference is simple. When we experience human emotion, it's simply agitated or restless feeling of the heart. When we experience devotion, it's when that feeling of the heart is calmed, not deadened, but just calmed, and then offered or lifted up to the point between the eyebrows with offering, with concentration. And so this is divine feeling, is when we take human feeling and calm it and lift it up to God. And this is also the secret of divine creativity. Again, Handel, when he wrote the Messiah, this great piece, it was in an uplifted state, and then it came to him. Master said that thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. And what he said was that you cannot create a thought. We think, oh, I had a thought, I had an idea. How many times have we said it? I've said it a lot. I had an idea, yeah. And nowadays I have to catch myself and think, no, I didn't have any idea. That was God's idea. I just tuned my radio station receiver, and in a way that idea came to me. But you'll find that really true inspired ideas, because this is creativity. What can we learn from what Swamiji did? Because I know I'm not going to write 150 books. I may write a couple in this life. I'm not going to write any music because I'm not really, my consciousness isn't designed that way. Most of us are not going to be doing these things. But really, you can apply this principle of creativity to everything that we do in our lives. Swamiji talked about applying it even in counseling or in friendship. He said that if you're in an uplifted and clear state, clarity is a big part of this, which I don't know that we have time to get into that, but that clarity of consciousness. But if you're in an uplifted, clear, calm, intuitive state of mind, you tend to say the right thing to help a friend or to help a situation or to uplift someone or to bring them further along their path of life. And it takes some attunement, it takes receptivity, but it's also a form of creativity. Even great business people who start new businesses or who work and apply a business in a new way, it's pure creativity. So this idea of creativity really is for all of us. I have found that because in my role with Ananda over the years, I've had to be doing certain creative things. Sometimes it's speaking, sometimes it is writing, but more often it's just decision-making, directions, these things. And they inevitably come true or much more true when I'm in meditation rather than just thinking about it. And yeah, true meditation, we're talking about concentration, we're talking about uplifted feeling of the heart. And when we can get into that state, then we can come up with creative solutions to our problems. And so work with creativity very consciously. And if you have something that you're working on in life, a problem, a family problem, business problem, relationships, art, any of these things, first meditate, offer your consciousness up, concentrate, get in the state of uplifted feeling, of devotion, and then go out and start to apply that uplifted consciousness and awareness to the problem you're trying to solve or the solution you're trying to find. And this is the way that we can learn from how Swamiji talked about creativity. I would very highly recommend that book Ramesh mentioned, Art as a Hidden Message. I have a few short notes here, and that's one of those notes is just to mention that book because it really does talk about creativity, not just in art, but the art of life, the art of living. You know that phrase, the art of living? You know where that phrase originated? Yogananda used that phrase in a talk that he gave in 1940s sometime. And he was talking about living a life that's a creative, artful life of just the way we live, the way we act, the way we go about what we do, the way we relate to people. He called that the art of living. And so we're all artists in various ways because we are all living. And so this is the way we can learn from Swamiji. I'll end by just making a comment that he wrote over 150 books, over 400 pieces of music, which is truly stunning. And it wasn't his. It's not like I need to express myself the way some people say, and I need to be creative and write my own music and write my own books. He didn't have any of that. Yogananda told him to write, that your role will be writing. And he said to Master, but you've written everything. We don't need anything else. And Master told him, no, much, much more needs to be written. And so he was doing this also for his guru. But someone commented once that 200-300 years from now, people are going to see all these incredible, vast, long books on all these topics by Swami Kriyananda. And people are going to say, no, one person didn't do that. It was a school of authors who all kind of worked with Swami Kriyananda because it would be impossible for one person to do that and to write 400 songs. But this is the power of inspiration and creativity and energy and concentration. But all of this merged together really makes for an inspired, creative life that is a life of artful expression and way of living. So let's all learn from Swamiji. Let's practice, let's live, let's tune in this way, and let's see how we can apply inspiration and creativity in our own lives. It's been a joy sharing with you and just tuning into this beautiful topic. So thank you all, and check out these books and these songs that Ramesh mentioned and that I've mentioned here. So may that joy, inspiration, and creativity, there it is, may it inspire us. And you'll find that if you listen to Swamiji's music, it can start to generate some of that creativity and upliftment and inspiration that we're talking about. So again, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Ramesh, for sharing. We'll see you next week.